Okay, good morning. I'm sitting here on a relaxing morning, or what should be a relaxing morning. It's a little after 6. I got a cup of hot coffee. I just got back from a walk with my dog. Sun's coming up. Looks like it's going to be a beautiful day. And so everything here points to a relaxing morning. I should be pretty relaxed. It's a weekend. And yet I found myself scattered. Just trying to plan my day and sort of in that state where I'm busy but not getting anything done. Uh, Moving from one thing to another, and I just kept moving stuff around, and I could feel immediately that I was starting to spin my wheels, and I don't know if you felt this, but for me, um, I can get to a point where if I'm not a certain kind of organized, or if I'm experiencing this certain kind of scattered thinking, I just know that the day is not going to be productive, and that's going to make me feel worse later on. And so typically, what I need to do is I need to do some kind of reset. So I found myself sitting down to do this, and I thought I would record a quick video about the questions that I'll typically ask myself in order to clarify why it is that I'm scattered and what I need to do to fix it so that I can move on, and get something done that I'm going to be happy with for the day. This is 3 questions that I use whenever I feel like I'm scattered, overwhelmed, or really anxious, and they have an extremely high hit rate in terms of helping me to identify the problem and then identify like a really actionable solution. So, question number 1 is what decision am I not making? This is a question that I typically find myself answering if I feel like I've had a lot of sort of low level anxiety over the course of several days or weeks. Oftentimes, if or for me at least, I, I'll know that I need to make a decision on something, and I won't make that decision typically because I'm either unsure of what the next steps are, or I have some kind of feeling in the back of my mind that making the decision is going to disappoint somebody else or cause some kind of conflict in my life. So I'll let these decisions just go unmade. And of course, no surprise, that's a cause of anxiety. So typically what I'll do if I'm sitting down on a day like today and I just am kind of spinning my wheels, I will pose this question to myself to see if there's a decision that needs to be made that I'm avoiding, and then sort of explore that. So sure enough, this morning I realized that there's at least one decision about my living situation that needs to be made. So I'm currently living in New England, but I've also got a room that I'm renting down in Texas, and I've been kind of hamstrung between the two for a long time. Just haven't really made any decisions about what uh, what what my next move is in terms of where I'm going to live for the next few months, and that's just kind of been stressful. So I know I need to make that decision, uh, and I know that that's affecting me. So this question helped to uncover that. And after I give you all 3 questions, I'll go back and tell you specifically what it is that I do with that information. So right now, what decision am I not making? I uncovered at least one about my living situation, and I'll tell you what I do with that in a little bit. So then moving on, the second question that I will always ask in situations where I feel like I'm either spinning my wheels or very anxious about something, especially for low grade anxiety when I can't tell, when there's no clear source of stress, right? Like it's one thing if you know what you're worried about or what's causing anxiety. This is more for those times when you just like you seem irritable, or something seems off, but you don't have an exact reason in your mind. The second question I'll always ask is, what have I said yes to that I should have said no to? And the purpose of this question is really to identify, or actually, it's to give a little bit of a voice to your own internal sense of um, what's right and wrong in terms of the decisions that you are making. So even if you've made a decision or a commitment, oftentimes we make those out of a sense of obligation, right? So I'll say yes to something because I feel like I don't have another option, or because I want to please somebody, or it just, it was a quick decision and that maybe I didn't realize the full extent of what I was saying yes to. There's a lot of reasons you can say yes, and it's always the easier answer up front. But I'll find sometimes that if I should have said no to something, there's a part of me that knows it. And as that decision starts to unfold, or as the consequences of that answer start to unfold, like anxiety kind of builds. And so, this question, what have I said yes to that I should have said no to, is a way of doing two things. First of all, well, actually, I guess three things. So, first, it'll help you identify the source of the stress, right? If you sit down and you're honest with yourself about this question, you will uncover the source of low-grade anxiety, or you can uncover that source. Second, it can help you to figure out if you can't actually get out of a commitment. Posing this question will at least help you to recognize a situation in the future when you should probably say no to something, right? Like if I say yes to I don't know, going on a business trip. That's a weird thing to say now because we're in the middle of a pandemic, so there are no business trips. But if I say yes to something like that, and then I realize, oh God, I like totally overcommitted on this, and I really don't have the time to do this along with everything else that I'm working on, I may not be able to back out of that, right? If I've made a commitment to a client or to an employer and other resources have been put in place so that I need to be there, I may not be able to get out of it, but I can at least recognize that that's something that I should pause on in the future and take very seriously. So that's the other thing that this question helps. And then, of course, the last thing is once you've identified something that you said yes to that you should have said no to, it's you have a thread that you can begin pulling in order to fix the problem. So very often, even if you've said yes to something, you can change your mind, right? A lot of times we don't. It's easier to complain than it is to go back to somebody and say, hey, I said yes to this, and the truth is I just don't have the bandwidth to do this right, or I didn't understand the scale of the issue, or I shouldn't have said yes. I'm sorry. Those things are all more difficult to do than complain. But the reality is, once you uncover this thing that you said yes to, that your body is telling you you should have said no to, you can go to work on the problem, and you can actually say no a lot of the time. So that's a very useful question. So question number one, what decision am I not making? Question number two, what have I said yes to that I should have said no to? And the last one for me is, what project is getting stalled? So if I am in a situation where I feel like I'm spinning my wheels a lot, usually what it means, or not usually, but if it's not because I'm avoiding a decision or because I've made a decision that I shouldn't have, oftentimes it's because I'm avoiding a project that needs to be pushed a little bit further in order to get completely off my plate. And so for me, what happens a lot is I'm very good at starting projects. I struggle more to finish things, and specifically, I struggle to let them go. So I'll take a project, far, but as I'm going, there's this perfectionism that kicks in, and so in my mind, the to-do list is never really done. I don't know if I've ever finished a project, just because there's always kind of that next step. And that's a challenge in and of itself. But um, one way that I grapple with this is by trying to get clear about something that I'm avoiding working on. Because once I do that, I can push things across the finish line much faster if I know what it is that is sort of taking up mental bandwidth and needs to get removed from my plate. So, what project is getting stalled? The third question. So, one more time. What decision am I not making? What have I said yes to that I should have said no to? And then what project is getting stalled? Those are the three big questions I'll sit down and just reflect on. And then, real quick, what I do with those things. So, what decision am I not making? Oftentimes, the answer to this is if I'm not making a decision, it's either because I'm uncomfortable with the situation, and that means I need to have a conversation with somebody, right? Or it's because I'm unaware of what the next step is, or I feel like I don't know what the next step is, but I haven't kind of admitted that to myself. So when I realize there's a decision that I'm not making, that one of the only two things I'll do one of two things typically. Either A, I will get very clear on what the next step is, and usually that just means picking something super small and like committing to doing it. And oftentimes, if I, well, actually, so I'll hold on a second. Before I go to the next step, I'll just tell you the second thing I do. So either I'll get very clear on the next step, or I'll schedule a conversation with somebody and sort of bring one or two talking points to that conversation. And typically, what I'm doing there is like clarifying how one or both of us sees the situation. So if this is a project that's going on and um, or let's say somebody's asking me about a commitment, right? And I haven't really said yes or no. Um, if I realize that's a decision that I'm avoiding making, I will come up with one or two questions and get on the phone with them and just get really, really clear about what it is they're actually asking for and whether or not I can do it. And then I'll have to make a decision on it. That's a commitment that I make to myself. Second question, what have I said yes to that I should say no to? So for this, if I identify something that I should have said no to, I have a personal rule that I have to then go and basically either say no or figure out what I can learn from the experience in order to turn that stressful situation into a not stressful one. Um, and like 80% of the time, I will push myself to say no to something. Once I've identified that I should have said no to it, if that's true, then I really need to say no. And I don't know if I have a good framework for how to do this yet, but just over the years, I've started pushing myself more and more to then go and tell the person no on something. And that's tough. But what I've found just through practice is that very often they are less disappointed with the no than I think I would have realized or I would have suspected. And so that's made no a little easier. Um, but if I really should have said no to something, I will go and say no. And I'll do another video on why that's important at some point. Um, there's a lot of reasons that's an important thing to do, even if it's inconvenient for you or the other person. If I can't say no, if the downside to saying no really is just way bigger than the downside to following through, then I'll at least commit to figuring out where the learning experience is. Um, because once I've identified what I can learn from this situation that I should have said no to, I can usually kind of power through it and not feel so bad about it. So those are the two things I'll do with that. And then finally, um, when it comes to things getting stalled, I will. There are some times when I feel very scattered in the morning. And if I notice that a project is getting stalled, I will typically do one or two things. I'll do a quick meditation on, and I use just the Calm app. It's like a 10-minute reset. Super easy to do, and a lot of times what I find is that it just it's like a cold shower for your mind. Just kind of everything else just goes away, and then I'm focused again, and I can approach that project and get something done on it that's going to feel sizable and meaningful. So I'll meditate or I'll exercise, and again, that can be very quick. A couple of kettlebell swings, or I'll if it's like, I guess the scale of the exercise goes up along with the magnitude of the problem, right? If this is like a big pivot or a career changing project that is getting stalled for something, or if I'm really angry and that's why I'm not taking action on something, I'll go for like a long run. I'll go do like 5 or 10 miles in the woods with my dog. Both of those, exercise and the meditation, just serve as a mental reset. They'll put things in perspective, and make it easier to clarify what the most important next action is. Like, nothing's better than getting really tired in order to clarify what the most important next action is. Because by the time you're done racing a dog for 5 miles, you don't have the energy to be involved in trivial stuff or to be angry about trivial stuff. And so I find that's a very helpful reset, and it makes the next step very clear. And it also tempers me so that I don't go and do something rash that I'm going to end up regretting down the line, right? Find myself doing this exact same like question exercise all over again just because I took a action when I should have like paused and reset for a second. So the 3 questions: what decision am I not making? What have I said yes to that I should have said no to? And what project is getting stalled? The answers, or the things that I will typically do with the information that comes from that exercise, is I will identify a very clear next step, or get on the phone with somebody in order to identify a next step. I'll force myself to say no to something if I really should have said no. And if I absolutely can't do that, and believe me, like 80 to 90% of the time when you think you can't do it, you can. So force yourself to do this. If I absolutely can't, or just am not willing to because of the personal stakes involved, I will identify a learning experience so that at least I'm getting something out of my own mistake. And then I'll, in situations where projects are getting stalled, I'll either exercise or meditate as a quick mental reset, and then use that clarity to attack like one very small next step so that I can keep that snowball rolling. So I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching.